Welcome to another episode of Stoke Meter, and we have Sean Reyes on the line here. Sean Reyes is the Attorney General for the state of Utah, and we caught him right after a workout, actually midway through a workout, right, Sean?
Yeah, man, you gave me a good break. You gave my lazy butt a break, so I'm like, oh, I have to do Maurice's thing. Let me cut this out really quick. And good to be on with you too, Gary.
Yeah, it's funny because
man, good to meet you.
It's awesome that you gave us this time, because I know that you said, oh, well, give my lazy, but there's no way you're lazy, man. Every time that I'm talking to you, you are in firefighting mode or some kind of strategic mode. And the fact that you can get a workout in, first of all, it's inspiring. So pumped.
Well, just honestly, Mo, trying to keep up with cats like you, and trying to be a baller. It takes a lot, and you try to get that balance, right? We're always the physical, the spiritual, the mental and emotional, all of that. But when you're running 1,000 miles an hour and you're working 100+ hour weeks, it's hard to find that balance. And you're trying to put family first and still help as many people as you can. I know you know what that's like, because I've seen you do that throughout your career. So it's a privilege to be on. I'm stoked.
Oh, yeah, I love it.
Yeah, you saw how I dropped that in?
I love how you dropped it in.
All right.
It's great because we get to see it in a different light than typical on the TV, with the suit and tie, and I love that.
Yeah.
Fact.
Well, I got to say something about that. People always stop me in the airports, or especially when I'm dressed like a little more casual, like, oh my gosh, you're so much nicer than when you're on TV. Like, you're so much happier and cool. And I'm like, yeah, because every time I'm on TV, I'm just announcing some, major drug bust and number of deaths and this crime. And I'm like, it's hard to be, smiley while you're talking about people's pain. But yeah, and they also, other thing, like, well, you're way taller than you look on TV. So I don't know, man. I must look really, really short, or maybe it's because I've grown so much out that I've lost the verticality.
Well, I've got to harp on that, because I know your grandparents. I knew your grandparents, and when I did some church stuff out in Hawaii back in the day.
Yeah, they loved you, bro.
Oh, they were awesome. Well, Rose and Soichi Maida. Now you've got to understand these guys. The first time I met Soichi, this dude he wasn't grumpy as much as he was fierce. And one of the most loving guys after you get past that exterior, but the dude was just self-made. And ironically, years later, when I moved to Utah, I was next door neighbors with Sean's brother, Kyle. And we made this connection. I go, wait, you're related to Soichi and Rose? Yeah. Man, you talk about a pure yin and yang. That was it. They were so opposite.
Yeah. Man, I'm glad you bring that up, because I rarely ever get to talk about my Hawaii grandparents. My tutu wahine, which Grandma Loke is, she was as pure and sweet and kind, but hardworking. When I was inclined to complain, because we would always go, almost every summer, we would go home to Hawaii and work on the Big Island. They had a lot of land up there. Yeah. Some would call it a ranch, some would call it a farm. It's just, in Hawaii, it's just the aina, and you malama the aina, you take care of it, it's sacred. And so we worked all kinds of different jobs out there, but one of them was going to the taro patch. And we would harvest taro, which is kind of like our potato root, and it's the component of poi,
right?
Which I realize isn't everyone's favorite, but we would harvest it as valuable, and we would share it with a lot of people in the community. Anyway, when you're like 11 years old or even 16 and an athlete, and you're hauling 80-pound sacks of taro up and down the mountain to the loi, this is not like your ideal summer, right? You could be chilling and hanging with your friends on the beach with the girls, and instead you're on this like remote little part of the island that time forgot, and you're hauling stuff. And then I look at my grandma, and she's got 2 of those bags, and she's in her 60s, and she's hauling up and down, and she's looking back at me like, "Are you coming or not?" I'm like, "Yeah, all right." And man, it makes you really appreciate. And I think that work ethic, I hope, seeped in a little bit. I know I wasn't appreciating it at the time. And then you have Grandpa Shoichi, who you hit right on the nose. One of our friends, Chieko Okazaki, who you might know, always talked about him. And she said he was kind of their protector when they were young Japanese American kids, and some of them had lost their parents, and they were kind of raising each other. And he was sort of the older brother for a lot of them. Right. They were in Makapala School in North Kohala, and she's like, he's always a tough nut to crack. Underneath, when I was on my LDS mission, a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, he would write to me, and he had gorgeous penmanship, and he had very deep, insightful thoughts. He was extremely well read, but you would never know that because growing up, he was rough and tumble. He would look for any fight on the Big Island, and he was feared. He would chase. I mean, there's stories. I have been stopped in Hawaii, and they like, when people find out you're Kinka Maeda. Kinka was his nickname. Kinka Maeda's grandson. Let me tell you stories. He chased these 3 Portuguese guys up the hills, right up, Pololu. He ran after these guys. There's Filipinos with machetes, and he chased them. And I guess, he liked to drink, he liked to fight, and he was tough as nails. Yeah. And then over time, my grandma's influence really worked on him, and the spiritual side of him, which was always there, really started to kind of dominate. And he spent the last 30, 40 years of his life just doing service for so many in the community there. He was the head of many civic organizations, and he mellowed a little bit, like enough that you could talk to him, but man, he was still growing up. We were all scared of him. He's just kind of gruff, tough Japanese guy. Japanese aren't very like, Mo, right? I mean, our culture isn't renowned for, touchy-feely, happy, smiley. These are the stoic culture. In fact, side note, my mom, we used to always joke, because my dad's this happy-go-lucky. He was this, larger-than-life Filipino entertainer guy. Yeah. And he would punish you, and you'd be happy about it. He'd be like, "Hey, this is going to be the coolest grounding you've ever had. Like, this is going to be so much fun. The next week, you can't watch TV, you can't go out with your friends, but I'm gonna give you some books, and we're gonna go to a different planet and do it." And you're like, "Oh, can we do this grounding some more?" And then my mom, who spent 40 plus years as an educator, principal, tough, tiger mom, she would compliment you, and you'd walk away feeling like worse almost. You'd be like, so. This was the culture there that you got to know a little bit about. And I'm so proud of it. I rarely ever get to speak about it. People always want to know about my dad's side of the family. His uncle was president of the Philippines, and he had done so many things in his career that were incredible. And my mom often gets overlooked, but she was the rock for us. And you mentioned my brother Kyle, who's a PhD and a vice president of university. And I think largely my mom's influence, hard work, integrity and honor, showing up and living up to your commitments, helping everybody you can, everywhere you can. And she had lots of opportunities to take over schools that were, the country club environment schools. And she always took these really tough assignments. And I'd ask her, "Why are you, like, you could have all these AP students who are going to go to Harvard and MIT and work with them. Wouldn't that be more gratifying than working with all these thugs who like can barely read and make it out of the ghetto?" And she's like, "Well, again, those other kids will have plenty of people who can help them. But I feel like maybe if I can just touch one of these kids and change their lives in a positive way and show them some, love and consistency, then that's worth it." And so, that feeling, both from the Hawaii side and the Japanese side, and of course the Filipino and Spanish influence, as you know, kind of all melds together in Hawaii and becomes this like local culture. And I feel so blessed to have been brought up both there and then here on the mainland. So I get the best of both worlds. And, you know, again, my grandparents, both of whom have passed, only had wonderful things to say about you. It's hard to be a missionary when you're out there, you know, and yet you found ways to touch so many people. Mom and dad have both passed now. And, you know, they also knew what a good friend you've been over the years. So thank you. And sorry, I just started to digress, and
awesome.
we didn't even start the show really.
But no, that's a perfect way to start a show, because one of the biggest things in Hawaii, and I hope everyone understands this, is the importance of ohana, or family. And that's one reason that we connect. As a matter of fact, that's why Gary's such a good friend, because he's like extended family. And it's one of those things
I can tell. Well, he's got that mana, that warrior spirit.
Yeah, no doubt about it. The mana, man.
Yeah.
And the other thing too is, when I look at all the influences, I remember Soichi was one of the tough guys, but he would always say, whatever you fight for, make sure that it's something that you believe in. And it's interesting to see how that influence went in your family, because I know all of you, not your sister as much, just because I met her on occasion when she came and visited. But to see you and Kyle, even though you're brothers and you're tight, your views are completely different. And there's that level of respect. And that's the other thing that I love to see, is that you were taught that way to respect. I mean, in the position you're at, heck, I was at your inauguration. You remember that?
Yeah, absolutely.
and I think, wasn't that 2013? I think that was 2013, right?
That was the first inauguration, 13. We've had several since then, or at least a couple more, but you were right there. You know, what a proud moment for my family, but really big responsibilities.
It was, but the one thing that I remembered is walking in there with all the politicians. It was like pit vipers. It was the smiling faces, but everyone had their agendas, and you could feel it. I didn't have to be a politician to understand that. But what I remember is the grace with which you met with every one of those individuals. And it wasn't a disingenuous feel whatsoever. It was that pure, I respect you. We might see differently, or might not even eye to eye, but I respect you. And that's one thing that I've noticed throughout your career that has been so fantastic. And I attribute a lot of that to your family. I had the opportunity to meet your dad a couple of times. And for those of you that have never met Sean's father, or had the opportunity to meet his father, he reminded me of Bruno Mars. He was a mini Elvis. He was the predecessor to Bruno Mars, no doubt about it. One of the nicest and the most artistic individuals I know. And I'm just wondering, you talked about your mom's side. I'm wondering how your dad's side influenced you.
Yeah. And just for a second, before we leave my mom's side, because of our shared heritage, the Japanese side, I don't want people leaving thinking that, you know, all I think about the Japanese side are like, we're emotionally stunted. And just like, I am so proud that Maeda name goes back to, you know, these Bushido warriors and ancient clans that were feared and revered warriors on the battlefield. But when it was time to put down the swords, they turned their endeavors to very culturally enriching art, reading. They were patrons of the arts. The Maeda clan there in Kanazawa, Ishikawa Ken, they're still you know, widely respected for that. And so that's always been a point of pride for me. And I've tried to live up to what I feel is the responsibility to rep that name and that culture. And when I've traveled to Japan or met with the prime minister or his wife, or my daughter sang in the One Voice Children's Choir and they loved her in Japan, she just connected there so much. And so we would travel and go. I was always so proud of that part of my culture. And then you hear stories of the fighting 442nd and on and on and on and on and on. So I just wanted to make sure that I left with that note of how much I believe the Japanese side of my family has helped shape who I am and the successes that I've been able to be a part of. I think many of them come from that upbringing. But yeah, from my dad's side, gosh, you mentioned Bruno Mars, and he didn't achieve quite the acclaim that Bruno Mars has here in the States, but in terms of talent, he was like that. And the amazing thing about my dad was that was just one facet of his success. What many people don't realize is that as a young man, he was chosen as the personal artist for the Pope, the Holy Father of the Catholic Church. So he painted portraits and pictures that hung in the Vatican. And he later on, when he came and struggled to find a career and establish himself here and help our family kind of move out of the tough neighborhood we were in, he eventually found a lot of success, more so with his art than with performing and singing. We would have John Wayne come to the house and sit for a portrait. The Duke, can you imagine, you know, as a kid, you're like, oh my gosh, I just saw this guy in some movies. And then Gene Autry and Magic Johnson and people like that. So Dad became an internationally acclaimed artist, particularly Western artist in that genre, but he always still entertained and performed. Kyle may not have told you, but Dad on the singing side was discovered by Bob Hope when he was performing in a club, and Mr. Hope said, I want him. I don't want his band. I always want him. And so he went and was the opening act for Mr. Hope on his USO tours to, you know, sing for American GIs. This is all, you know, post-World War in the 1950s, World War II. And then the third rail, which is crazy, or the fourth wall, maybe, I don't know. He kind of buffaloed, he's a very confident guy, but he loved film and had grown up doing a lot of, like, literally taking his mom's nice brand new sheets and cutting them up to make movie screens and selling. He was an entrepreneur as a child, selling tickets to all the kids in the neighborhoods and doing his own home movies. So he talked his way, literally said, oh yeah, I've made several movies, you know. And so MGM Studios was filming a lot in the Philippines, and he talked his way onto a set, kind of, I say, buffaloed his way on there. And then before you know it, he was a producer, then a line producer, and was doing a lot of things for MGM Studios, creating blockbuster Hollywood movies. So, I mean, all of this before he was 25, if you can imagine. Incredible career. The nephew of the former president of the Philippines, a highly respected president. The Nobel Prize of Asia is called the Magsaysay Award, which is his godfather and his uncle, named after President Ramon Magsaysay. So Dad does all of this stuff. He'd been an intelligence officer in the military. And then Marcos comes into power, and my dad had campaigned against him and warned the Filipino people. And then when Marcos became president, my dad he's got a big mouth, and Marcos's thugs and goons came and said, hey, you're part of the aristocracy. You're one of us. Like, you've got 3 homes that you bought for your, 11 brothers and sisters and your parents, and you've had all this success. Like, just shut up. You've got it made in the shade. Just go along. Like, you don't need to do anything. I mean, but if you open your mouth again, we're going to come back and shoot you next time. And he could not, like you said, he has that spirit, that fighter spirit, and he could not keep quiet. And because of that, in 1967, his aunt had to take him, the former first lady, put him on a one-way flight to help him escape before he was executed. Wow. And he landed in LA knowing nobody. People talk about coming to this country with $10 in their pocket. He didn't even know he was leaving. She was like, hey, you get to say goodbye to your brothers and sisters, but you don't get to hug your girlfriend or your bandmates or your business partners goodbye. You leave everything. And wow. He was like, okay, I'm going to Hollywood. That sounds really cool, but when do I come back? And she's like, you never come back while Ferdinand Marcos is president. He'll kill you as soon as you're back. He'll probably kill you in LA, but we have a better chance of protecting you. And so they stashed him with different people. He was homeless, lived under the bridge in Venice Beach. And I mean, crazy stories. And so that's why everybody's always asking me, because his story could be, 2 or 3 different Hollywood or Netflix films. And And then beyond that, he went on to do some really incredible, cool things. But the story of survival and faith, the entire time, he was like, Sean, I knew God, if I did the things the right way, and I did what he felt was right, that God would guide him, protect him, and pray. I mean, he's like, I'd never prayed, harder and more fervently, and he felt always like God was helping to lead him. And so those types of things growing up, faith, family, and certainly he would teach us this country, is flawed as it might be in some ways, as imperfect as we all are as Americans. He says, this is the greatest country. It took me in when it was a refuge and sanctuary, and it's a great light to nations. And he was so patriotic and so just loved what America stood for, what he felt America stood for. And then things like, we were in a very poor area when I was born, and everyone say, buddy, why are you working, 3 jobs to make it? You could work no jobs and make more money on welfare. And it would just drive him crazy and nuts. And I was 1 year old. He dressed me up in some Richard Nixon pajamas, 1972, and marched me around downtown. I'm imagining like Lion King, like Simba and Mufasa. He's holding me up, which now, guys, I realize is child endangerment. He probably would have been, put away by DCFS. But he's literally like taking me around with a Richard Nixon, who wasn't particularly popular in that neighborhood, and saying, this is the future of America. Like, and this is what America's all about. Again, hard work and respect for authority and the rule of law and all those things. And so it was really hard growing up not to feel that energy and that constant, kids, pray every day. And when you're saying your prayers, thank the Lord that you're here in America, because you could be a whole lot of other places. And while those places have beautiful people and amazing cultures and so much to offer, the freedoms and opportunities that you have, these liberties are so valuable and are not free, and you have to fight for them and be vigilant. And this was a constant refrain coming up, along with all the other Asian sorts of and Hispanic, Latino values that you can imagine about hard work and service and volunteerism. So it was awesome. And, he taught us cool things like martial arts. And he studied with some of the best. He studied with Danny Nasanto, with Sifu Lee, with Bruce Lee, with, I don't remember, because I was only like literally 1 year old when Sensei Lee, when he passed, and my dad talked so fondly of him. But I remember being in his presence. My dad would bring me to the dojo, and just the kind of this light, this energy that he had. And maybe it's just in my mind's eye afterwards recreating it. But that was an important part of our upbringing, which, probably didn't help being Asian when you're there and, just living into the stereotype of that. But great, amazing parents, incredible grandparents and heritage. I miss them dearly. I wish that I could just, see them again, just to thank them for how much they've done. My mom, Mo, you remember, excuse me, passed very unexpectedly. Yes. Kyle and I were both giving TED Talks that day when she called us right before. She called me, and I'm about to go out on stage to give a TED Talk. It's TEDx. It's not Big TED, but it's still they take these things quite seriously. They don't mess around. They're like, General, you have to be on your mark here. By the way, General is a term that I don't like, but it's the protocol. It's what everybody calls me, Attorney General. I'm not a real general. I'm like just a fake general, but that's the terminology. So they say, General, you have to be on your mark. We're going to start the camera. And 1 minute before I go on, my mom calls, and I'm looking at it thinking, you know what, I'll just call Mama back this weekend. I don't have time to call right now and talk to her. I don't have time to answer the call. And from here, we're going down to Southern Utah, where we had won the lottery to get into one of the beautiful monuments down there, and national parks. And down there, you don't have any cell phone reception or coverage. So I'm like, look, I talk to my mom almost every day, but I'll grab her in a couple days and we'll catch up on the weeks. But she's persistent. She just keeps buzzing and ringing. So I'm, she's mom. She's Japanese. She's not. She has something important to tell me. So I pick it up like, hi, mama. And she's first thing she says is, hi, son. Yeah, I love you. Good luck today. I know you'll do well. I've been fact checking your speech. So she's a former speech and drama major at BYU. So she has reviewed this 10 times, and she has found a fact that she doesn't think is maybe 1,000% accurate. She said, well, you referenced that there was a member of our family who fought in the 442nd Regiment, this highly decorated Japanese America unit in World War II. And I said, yeah. She said, well, he's not you say he's an uncle. He's not a real blood uncle. He married into the family. And I'm like, mom, under any legal definition, he's a member of the family. I think I'm good. She's like, well, I just don't want you to be like those reporters, like that guy in the helicopter who was making stuff up. And then and I'm like, mama, I got 20 seconds. They're literally in my ear counting down. I don't have time to debate. I think I'm good. I kind of do this for a living. And I said, I love you. And she goes, I love you too. I know you'll do great. Tell Kyle I love him. And we're so proud of you. And I thought, okay, cool. Thanks, mom. And I went out with a lot of confidence from my mom, and we did our thing. And you can still see those TEDx talks on YouTube. Like all 5 people who've watched it, my family members of. But the relevant part of the story, and the reason I think it's important, I want every one of your listeners just to ponder this for a second. That was the last time I got to talk to my mom. What I didn't realize is we drove down to southern Utah and we were having a great time on razors, there in Moab and doing fun stuff. Is that the governor was trying to reach me. He had sent actually state police out to try to track me down because he was word had gotten to him, but not to me, that my mom was on life support. And then somehow a text pinged miraculously to my son's phone where we were down there. And it just said, Sean, get home as soon as you can. We're holding mom until you get home before we let her go in California. So I immediately was able to a friend, an angel, got me on a flight. And we sang all of her favorite, songs, Hawaiian songs. And we let her go the next day on Easter Sunday. But the whole time I was there, we were talking and speaking. She was not conscious. I think her spirit was there and she could feel us, but I never had a chance to talk to my mom, to say all the things or have that conversation. And how glad was I that I took that phone call, which I was going to ignore twice. And, by all accounts, reasonably could have ignored, because I was just going to talk to mom in a couple days and catch up like we always do. And what a blessing it was to have the last thing that my mom said to me on this earth, that she loved me, she was proud of me, she knew I would do well. And sorry, again, just emotional because we lost dad just recently. And so all of these things kind of, they come full circle. But no matter what you're doing, I don't care if it's the president of the United States, and I've had those types of situations, or you're going in to argue for the United States Supreme Court or the Utah Supreme Court or a circuit court, and I've had situations like that. It doesn't matter what the most important deal of your life, the most important podcast of your life, the most important match or tournament. Family comes first. And if your mom or dad calls, or your kid or your wife or your husband call, answer the call, tell them you love them. Maybe it's not a long call, but you just never know. You never know when it's your time or when the last time will be. So, of anything I can communicate today, maybe the one most important thing to follow up on your comment about Ohana family is make sure that they're the top priority, and that you take that time and never miss a call or an opportunity to be with them. You'll never get that back. And
Yeah.
It's a.
Hey, Sean, I just want to, first of all, thank you. I think we all need that reminder. And I think you really drilled that home. But I wanted to say that, I was looking up who you are, the things that you've accomplished in your life, which is just all over the place, just incredible. Any one of them by themselves is unbelievable, but yours is just like on and on and on and on. And it really was interesting because the thing that really was interesting to me, or that got me thinking, is who are the people behind this guy? And I really appreciate you opening up for us and our audience, because holy crap, man, like it's about family. And it kind of hits close to home because my dad was a physician, but he raised us on a farm and a ranch. And I remember those feelings of like, man, I'm bucking hay when my friends are playing, on Nintendo or Atari or whatever it was, and you don't appreciate it at the time. But it is, after what you've told me, it is so apparent that everything you do is behind you. There's this massive compass of family that directs not what you do and how you look at stuff. And how cool is that, man? Like, and also just the whole Hawaiian culture is just, baby. Everyone I know, it's all about that. Yeah, exactly. It's so cool. But anyway, thank you. I really do appreciate you opening up, because, man,
thank you, Gary.
This is more to me. Yeah.
That means so. That means
anyway, go ahead.
Much
I know
you
were going to say something.
No.
What's that?
I said that means so much to me. And I haven't even started talking about my secret weapon, who's, you could roll all my parents and everybody else up into a ball, and they still can't catch up to my wife, Seisha, and who's raised 6 kids, amazing kids who are amazing because of their mother. I always joke to my friends, like, what have you contributed to that? And I'm like, well, some skin color. It's cool. And they've got some, Hawaiian heritage. But it is about family, and not just the nuclear family, but you guys, all the extended family. Everybody laughs. They're like, is that your real cousin? Is Maurice your real cousin? Or as we say in the islands, calabash cousin. Like, Gary doesn't look like you. I know he's not your cousin. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? It doesn't really matter to us, because you need that whole tribe behind you. And then what a lot of people, especially in Western culture, I just don't think it's quite as much. Certainly they have an emphasis on, grandparents, which like us in the islands, it's your family going into the future. So your children and your posterity, but it's your family behind you, your grandparents, but your ancestors. And Japanese and Hawaii, and there's a big focus on those who may not be here with you in this physical temporal plane, but are surrounding you and have sacrificed a lot, and whose name you bear and you represent. And I think that maybe more so than some of my other friends, as I've discussed it with them, they're like, dude, you talking about ghosts? And I'm like, well, no, I'm talking about like my ancestors. I feel them, and I feel like I'm an extension of them. And I'm part of a link and a chain that goes a long way, and I have to be strong and try to do my part. And, there's a big emphasis on honor and the family, but that whole link that goes, I think, and we often talk about it in spiritual terms as this eternal, circle or chain. But thank you for giving me the chance to talk about it. There are not many interviews on Fox or CNN, or I have a friend, Henry Cejudo. I have another friend who represents former champ Mike Tyson, and those guys. I love those guys. They've got a cool program, but they're like, hey, AG, you want to come on? It's like Hot Box. Yeah. And I'm like, maybe after I'm out of office, and I'm not passing judgment. I'm not like, more power to them to do their thing. I love their show. I've listened to it, but I'm like, just who and what I represent right now. Maybe not, maybe not immediately. So, Yeah, I will mention one other thing about Hawaii. Not only the culture do I love, and the people and the spirit and everything that Maurice mentioned. I'm 85 pounds over my college playing weight. So I was a skinny, athletic, collegiate volleyball player. And my dear wife, after 6 kids, probably weighs like 3 or 4 pounds more than when we got married. And I weigh like 75 or 85 pounds more, which is a problem because here at home, I'm like perpetually like, oh man, I got to cut 30 pounds. And I'm working and hard to just try to, lose one of the chins. I'm trying to go from triple chin to double chin. and then I go home to Hawaii and I'm like, my aunties are like, oh, you're wasting away. Like, oh my gosh, no one's feeding you. And they look at my haole wife like it's her fault, like, are you not taking care of our boy? And I'm telling you, it feels so good because when I'm in the islands, I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of tiny. I need to bulk up. Not really. I know that's not true, but anyway, there's less of a focus in the islands about kind of. Certainly, they know that health is important, but there's kind of less on just sort of the superficial.
Yes.
Appearance, and it's just more about the heart. If you've got a good heart like you, Gary, it doesn't matter. You're haole, you're popolo. I mean, African American. It doesn't matter.
Yep.
The external. It's who you are inside. I love that about the culture. But yeah, Mo, when you talk about the political world being. It's so much about superficiality. Not to say there aren't really good public servants in politics. Of course there are, and many of them are trying to do really good things, but it's so seeped in this pit of vipers, and it's about climbing, and it's about their agendas. And I always tell this joke because I think it's kind of funny, but it really has a poignant point to it. And I say, I hate politics, and it kind of surprises some people. And I say, you know what the definition of politics is? And they kind of think about it. I'm like, well, I'm an English major, so I studied a lot of etymologies, and it really comes from 2 cognates, 2 root words. One, poly, which means many, of course, and then so they're waiting for the, and I'm like, and ticks, like little blood-sucking insects. And when you put those 2 things together, that's the definition of politics. And everybody laughs, and they think it's funny because there's a lot of truth to it. And then I talk about politicians. I said, they're the embodiment of politics. And for a politician, in my book, always asks this question: what's in it for me? How does a particular position amplify me or help promote my agenda? How does it serve my interests? Conversely, a public servant asks the opposite, which is, how do I serve the office and the people that it represents? How do I give of myself and sacrifice to make sure that I'm being the best? Now, look, Mo said it well. I don't agree. Half the people of Utah don't agree with me. My own brother and I have differing views on a number of things, and I don't even agree with myself 100% of the time. Like I'm conflicted, and I change and I evolve. But what we're missing too much in politics today is that underlying respect and love. Like Maurice said, my little brother is the greatest. He's incredible and such a great example, and a tremendous human being, great father, husband, brother, everything. And we can disagree, but I know it comes from a place of goodness from him, yes. Whatever his philosophies. And I love him for that, even though we may patently disagree about the approach to accomplishing those good things. But more and more and more, there's less of that. My dad's uncle, when he was president, there were 17 assassination attempts on his life.
Oh my gosh.
He was a great president. He opened up the Philippine White House, Malacanang Palace, to average everyday people who could come, peasants, and line up and talk to the president, shake his hand, complain about the water in their little village, and he would meet with them. It drove his security detail crazy, but that's who he was. And one time the communists, they had tried to kill him numerous times, and he had 9 lives. But this particular one, one of their best trained agents, and I've shared this in a TED Talk, I'm going to try to give you the 1-minute version. he trained for years, lined up as a peasant, pretending to be someone who just wanted to shake the president's hand. But in his basket, instead of a basket full of fruits to give to the president, was a weapon, and he was going to assassinate him. And when he got up close, he felt so much love, is what he said later on. This hardened assassin, he said he saw this president kneeling down in his barong and fancy, pants, but in the mud, there on the front lawn of the Capitol, to hold an old grandma and call her grandma, and then cry with little kids who were not getting enough to eat. And this assassin said, I realized in that moment, I've never felt so much love emanating from one individual, much less a public figure, that he was the best chance for all Filipino people to flourish, even though he was a capitalist and the assassin was a communist, and his job was to go kill him. He couldn't. So when it came time, he tipped over his basket to show the weapon, said, please execute me quickly, because they'll torture me if I go back not having completed my mission, and they'll kill me anyway. So the palace guards are all ready to fire on this guy, and the president says, wait, like, I sense a lot of goodness and integrity in this guy. Please stand up. Would you be willing to serve with me? And he said, absolutely, I would love to. See, how about on my personal detail as one of my security? Can you imagine the president's like this Secret Service is just beside themselves, like, stop talking to this guy, let us kill him. No, he could have killed me. He like literally just gave himself up. And that guy ended up becoming one of the best bodyguards, not just for the president, but my family. He protected my Auntie Luce. He protected my dad. They call him Manila Boy. And he lived to, his 90s. But the point of the story that I really wanted to share is that the power of love, not romantic love, which is important, but the kind of Christ-like brotherly love that can overcome any differences, including ideological differences. So you don't have to agree. I don't think all of the Savior's apostles agreed when they were walking around, and they probably got tired of each other living in the same apartment, and someone snored and someone didn't have fold their tunic the right way, all the stuff that but they loved each other, and they could disagree and still have that. That's missing a lot in politics. That doesn't mean you can't stand up fiercely. And I get tired of some, not public servants, but politicians who just want to not stand up for principle. They want to do the popular thing, and they take a poll and make their decision based on what they think is popular. That's not what I'm talking about. You can be principled and fight and stand up, but you can still be a statesperson, still show respect, still care about the very people that you're disagreeing with. That's harder and harder, because they're trying to kill you, and they're trying to cancel you and your family, and it's made it harder to demonstrate that kind of love and respect. But family, love, those are the things that I've tried to bring. You won't get that, Maurice, if you read articles or you listen to a lot of folks, because that's not what wins in politics these days, and that's not as effective. To properly climb the ladder, you have to destroy the other side, raise their village, take their women and children, erase their name from history, all of that. It's too bad, because that's not how I was taught, and we see too much of it in American politics today.
One word that's coming to mind right now, Sean, is legacy. And the reason I say legacy is, having known your grandparents, having known your parents, having known a lot of your extended family in Kohala, it's obvious that you're carrying that on. And I see in it a lot of the purpose of where you take different stances from a political side of it. And it's based not on what's in it for me attitude, as you referred to earlier. It's really for what you believe is the greater good. And it kind of like what the assassin saw, right? He said, this is for the greater good. And I see that in your family. I see that in what you're doing there. But another thing that came to mind was in Kohala, on the way to Pololu Valley. You remember that big Kamehameha rock? There's a legendary rock over there that supposedly King Kamehameha picked up to warm himself. That's a heavy rock, man.
Yeah,
But,
and allegedly as a child on top of that.
Yes. But it's interesting because in order for him to be warmed, he had to lift something heavy. It was a burden for a moment there to carry that thing. I mean, it's no small rock, man. I even tried to go over there. No, this guy, no way, this kid's lifting it. But when I look at what you're doing, you have to lift hard things, lift heavy things. It's taking a toll on you. But at the same time, in the process of lifting, it accomplishes the task of keeping you warm and helping you to carry on in a better way. I mean, it's kind of a corny analogy.
No, I appreciate that. By the way, Gary, that was Maurice's way, taking a toll on you, of saying you're fat and look old with all the gray now and everything. I know this guy because we used to be young, fit fighters together, and he's so gracious. He just didn't want to say it. No, Mo,
he's good at the side swipe, compliment.
I appreciate that. There's a lot of on the burden side, but having friends like you, having a lot of people, it helps. I get a lot of messages of people stopping me on the street, thanking me for what I do, and that means a lot. I think people think, politicians, they get pretty thick skin. We do, and you can't internalize every bit of praise or criticism, or you'd just be a wreck. But trust me, man, I stopped reading all the online comments, after the first year. I mean, there were enough death threats to deal with, much less, you're a waste of flesh on earth and all that stuff. And then your kids hear it, and your spouse. It's crazy, but all of that is worth it when you can rescue little kids and take them back to their families, when you can stand up and protect senior citizens who've been defrauded, when you can keep kids from committing or even thinking about suicide, and give them purpose and value, let them know people love and care about them through the Safe UT app, or through our Lava Foundation, Liberate All, Value All, through all these different things that we're involved with. But you're right. I mean, actually, people are like, wow, that's a cool job, AG. It is awesome. Yeah. I actually did cooler stuff. And in many ways, I felt like I already had a cool gig. I had the best job in the world. Our, venture fund was killing it. Life was awesome there already. I didn't really need to do this. Sometimes I feel like some people in politics, this is the coolest thing they're ever going to do. Yeah. And it's kind of so they never want to give it up, and they'll do anything they can to stick around and stay around. Like I'm happy when my time's up, whenever that is, to go back to doing what I was doing before. This service is much like the service I feel like I gave for 2 years out for my church. It's not something that necessarily helped my career. It certainly hasn't helped the pocketbook because they don't pay much, and I end up paying a lot, and personal net worth dives down in some of your best money-making years. But all of that isn't as important as what you're able to do. I'm hearkening back to what my parents and my culture have taught me. If it's about helping make life better for others, lessening suffering, saving lives, all that's more important than money. And I'll have plenty of time to go back out and rebuild.
There's no
on the business side.
I have to interject right there, because you told me a killer story. And it goes back on the legacy, and the legacy that your father left behind with a lot of people he influenced in Hollywood. And many of you are avid Karate Kid fans, maybe Cobra Kai fans, and you'll know that William Zabka plays Johnny Lawrence. You remember the guy that was picking on Daniel LaRusso in Karate Kid? Ironically, that same individual in real life was Sean's Danny LaRusso. Okay, I'm wondering if you can go into that story and then go into bullying and all that stuff that you're talking about too.
Yeah. Oh, man, again, Mo, I'm talk story kind of guy. Our people in Hawaii, we come from a long history of oral tradition. And I'm going to say, I'm going to try to shorten it so that I don't spend too much of your time. The reason I ended up speaking a lot was unlike most of my cousins, and I come from, in Hawaii, we've got cousins like the Casimiros, and who are professional worldwide singers, and Uncle Kindy Sproat. And I got kicked out of a Mormon choir. I got kicked out of a choir from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints when I was a kid because I can't sing. And then I wasn't a good dancer. And so when we would do performances and luau's, they were like, hey, what's Annette's kid gonna do? He can't sing, he can't dance, but the kid can talk a little bit. Put him in front of the mic. So from a very early age, I was the MC, and that led to my, my rapping career. Short as it was when I was growing up, in my DJing years and all of that. But before I became a cool rapper DJ and ended up playing ball and getting recruited for sports and everything, I was the geekiest Asian kid. We had barely come out of a very tough neighborhood. I was born in Westchester, on the border of Inglewood, Westchester. They're right by Randy's Donuts in La Cienega.
Yep.
This was before Kyle was even born. And it was tough. And my parents worked and scrimped and scraped, and we were able to move out to a much nicer neighborhood in the San Fernando Valley. We weren't rich by any means, but we were surrounded by a lot of rich people. And it was like Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, except I was a goofy Asian kid who played Dungeons and Dragons, had a bowl cut, did martial arts. If you can't think of a more stereotypical Asian kid that they'd want to beat on, it was me. And I was a little bit bigger for my size. So all the other Asian kids that were out there, I was like their protector. And so these country club boys that I went to junior high school with would just beat the tar out of me. And I was trying to protect everybody else. And, my Asian friends, I'd stand up for them, and then the bell would ring, and literally while I was getting beat up, they would all run to class because they didn't want to be late, because, you know, good Asian kids aren't late for class. And I'm like, what? You know, I'm like, I'm here like 1 on 10 trying to protect y'all, and you're running in. And I really got to a point where I didn't even want to be, I didn't want to be me. I was embarrassed about who I was and the culture. I don't know if I ever consciously thought about taking my life, but I knew I didn't want to live. Like I just didn't, I read comic books so much because I just wanted to be somebody else. I wanted to be somebody like heroic, and I was like the worst. It's not just bad that you're in junior high school, which sucks for almost everybody, and you have braces and literally a bowl cut. Like, I mean, come on. That's one of my mom. I'm like, Mom, that was like literally like torture as a kid. And she was like, it was cheap. We could just, save money. And so in the midst of just the worst time in my life, my dad worked with Billy's dad, who is incredible. Mr. Zabka ran the Tonight Show. He's a war hero. And he and my dad had business together. And so my dad would bring me over to the Zabka home, and everybody knew Billy. Kirk Cameron lived in the area. Ricky Schroeder lived in the area, which were big names back when we were young for Silver Spoons and all kinds of different shows. Well, Billy Zabka was the biggest of all them. He was the golden boy. Even though he played the thug in the movie, everyone loved Billy and Elizabeth Shue. And actually, most people didn't like Ralph Macchio at the time. I think I've heard Ralph's a nice guy now, but none of us really liked Ralph. But there I was, and I was just, again, bullied and broken. And Billy became my protector and hero. And Billy was a senior in high school. I was an 8th grader, and something like that in that area. Maybe I was in 7th or 8th grade, but he said, Sean, if anybody picks on you again, tell them that I'm your bodyguard. And I'm like, are you kidding? Sweet. Well, I think he thought maybe that would like keep them from hitting me and punching me because they were afraid of him and that he would come. Well, it worked, not in the way that he envisioned, but the next time I was getting thumped by a bunch of bullies, I was like, hey, leave me alone. Billy Zabka is my bodyguard. And they didn't say, oh, no, Billy's going to beat us up. They were like, say, come again? They're like, Johnny Lawrence, Billy Zabka? I'm like, yeah, do you know him? Yeah, he's my good friend. Could you get an autograph for him? No way. And I was like, I did. And pretty soon I went from being the total pariah to, hey, you know what? He's a cool kid. Like if Billy Zabka's hanging out with him, he's great. Like a mascot, you know, I wasn't rich. I wasn't, you know, I didn't go to their country clubs, but they stopped beating on me. And then Billy like inspired me. He's like, you know what? You've got good size. You know, you're athletic. I don't think I was, but he told me I was. And I ended up becoming in high school captain of the basketball team, the volleyball team, played on the football team, had offers from colleges in all of those sports, and became a DJ and a rapper. And Billy, I remember seeing him at a club years later. He didn't even recognize me, but I thanked him, and I think he was like, oh, okay, yeah, cool. Super nice, super sweet guy. So this time he's coming in to Fan X, Dan Farr, Jeff Wright, and Abby Wright have this incredible, it used to be called Salt Lake Comic Con. I helped them when they first started. And I've been on their advisory board ever since. And I found out Billy Zabka's coming in to sign autographs as Johnny Lawrence. And Cobra Kai loved the show. I know many people do, and Utah loves the show. And so I said, hey guys, let me go pick up Billy at the airport. And they said, yeah, sure, no problem. On our own time, some of my law enforcement guys, you know, again, on their own dime, their own time, they'll go help and pick up and transport people from the airport. So I did it, and I wore my official law enforcement gear, and I picked him up, and his buddy Marty, who plays Sensei Kreese in the show and back in Karate Kid, he's there. He's just finished Dancing with the Stars, and he's like pooped and he can barely walk off the plane. So I'm carrying his bags, and Billy's like, wow, this is so cool that they sent a police officer to come get us. And no one else has ever done that at any Comic-Con. And I take them, and it's, yes, sir, yes, sir. You know, and he has no idea. Along the way, it's kind of funny because 3 or 4 people are like, hey, AG, hey, how's it going? We love you. Can we take a selfie with you? And they're taking a selfie. And he goes, they keep calling you AG. And I'm like, yeah, it's just, you know, it's a term of endearment here for law enforcement. He goes, oh, okay, cool. And somebody else runs up, and they're trying to get my phone number. And will you speak at this event? And he's like, you're the most popular cop I've ever seen. And I'm like, well, you know, just very friendly people. We love our law enforcement here in Utah. Anyway, I can only keep it going for about half an hour. He's like, where are you from? And I said, LA area. He goes, well, I'm from the Southern California too. And he goes, where? So I was born in Westchester, but grew up in the San Fernando Valley. He goes, what? I'm from there. And I'm like, really? Wow. He goes, what a coincidence. Where? And I tell him, you know, he's like, that's where I'm from. Oh my gosh. And then I totally freaked him out. Well, I'm like, sir, actually, I knew that. And you live, I told him what street he lived on, where his house was, the layout of his pool, and his sister's name and his brother. And then he was like, wait, are you one of those stalker guys? That like, no. And I reminded him who I was. And we had such a tender moment. As I went back and broke down my pain and what I was going through, he was so moved. He's like, I had no idea. I never knew that. He goes, that's so cool that I changed the life of a police officer. And I had to eventually clue him in. His buddy Marty's like, I don't think he's a police officer, man. He's like, everybody. So I tell him the attorney general, and he's like blown away, like, no way. Like, he's like, just to think that I might have had a little part. And I was like, oh, it wasn't little. I can't tell you where I don't know exactly where I would have gone, but I do know that you totally changed the arc of my life. And then he said, wait, your last name's Reyes? Your dad was in film and he worked with my dad? He goes, not Buddy Reyes, right? And I'm like, yeah. He goes, oh my, I love Buddy. He's like the best. He starts telling me all these stories about my dad. He's like, I worked with him for 2 years. We had this film. I'm like, I know, Tunnel Rats. And oh yeah, and just on and on and on. Everyone's staring at us, right? Because we're in the middle of the baggage claim and then out on the curb, and we're hugging and crying. And he says, let me call. Let's surprise your dad right now. Let's get him on a Zoom. And I'm like, that's going to be kind of hard unless you have a really special, phone plan that I'm not aware. I said, Billy, my buddy died last year. Oh, he was like, oh man. Oh, so I'm so sorry. I'm like, no. I'm like, let's call your dad, because he's larger than life. You know, we talked about how our dads were our heroes and had changed us so much, but it was so meaningful. I'm telling you, Maurice, I dropped him off. I couldn't get out of the parking lot. I called my wife. I was crying, and my wife was like, "What's going on? What happened?" I'm like, I am a 13-year-old boy again right now, and I just reconnected with my bodyguard, my angel. This guy was, not only was he cool and everyone looked up to him, but he literally saved me. Yeah. And I just said, I can't even process that. And then he was so complimentary of my dad. He was just talking and talking. He knew my dad in a way many people didn't. And, you know, in the later years, dad with dementia and other things kind of got, like crazy Uncle Larry sort of a little bit. And some people remember him like that. And Billy remembered him the way I wanted to remember him when I want to. And when people talk about your family like that, man, it's just the emotions were so thick. And I'm like literally sobbing in there. My wife's like, this is good for you. I'm like, it's not good if people find out that, the attorney general who's trying to, stare down cartels and is bawling in his car, because he, from a Comic-Con, or a Fan X experience. And she's like, no, you need to be more, again, you need to stay connected to the emotions. And something that I hardly talk about, not because I don't want to, it's just I don't get the opportunity. Hawaiian culture, we don't have therapists. Mo, in Japanese culture, we don't do that. That's a sign of weakness. You don't barf your feelings out to people, and it's that you endure hard things internally. You're stoic. You don't burden other people, and you certainly don't do therapy. Well, I've realized seeing a therapist for a number of years, it's helped my marriage. It's helped my relationship with my kids. It's helped me be a better leader, because emotions underlie everything that we do and are a motivating factor. We're either pushing against them or we're trying to embrace them. We don't even realize it. And half these emotions, or most of them, are ones we've carried over from since we're children, and we've just never really resolved them. And my therapist said something really revelatory to me a few years ago. He said, Sean, and I understand it with the job that you have, you are a master at putting up a wall and blocking out negative feelings, all that hate that comes towards you, all of the negativity, all the crazy things that you have to endure and see, child pornographers and predators and the dark web stuff, exploiting people and murders and rapes. And I get how you've put up a stone wall, and it's amazing. You have like a mutant ability to push away negative emotion. But he said, guess what? Human beings can't just push away only negative emotion. It's impossible to do that and let the positive emotion alone filter in. Yeah. You, unbeknownst to you, you're pushing out a lot of the other emotion that you need to be able to stay connected to the most important people in your life. And so you have to figure out a way. I'm not saying embrace that negative emotion in a way that's, like that is damaging to you, but realize that that is part of your progression, is that you have to be able to confront those, deal with them, and then the positive emotions will be so much more impactful and sweet. But your emotional filter will not be filtering out all emotion, because what you don't understand is you're filtering out all emotion. You've become, in some way, that's not to say you're not an empathetic person and you're highly functional and you can do a lot of great things, but you are losing out on something, an incredible part of your spirituality and your experience as a human being, by, again, building up this wall. And so I was like, wow, man. And then that wasn't just in one, session. That took a lot of self introspection and time. But that was the thrust of it. So this bullying situation that I experienced, and mental and behavioral health challenges that we see, whether it's cutting or kids not feeling like they're addicted to pornography, or they're addicted to drugs. And it's not just kids, it's adults. so much of that is to try to numb and figure out a way to cope and deal with pain. And that pain may be emanating from a lot of sources. So we created, some friends and I, a foundation. It's been around for a few years, but we rebranded it Liberate All, Value All, Lava, because of it, kind of an ode to the Polynesian heritage and the spirit of that. But in my job, I encounter people every day who are enslaved or imprisoned in different types of bondage. Might be economic bondage because they don't have access to education or the right job skills or training. It could be physical bondage. I see that a lot. That's very evident and obvious. That's human trafficking. That's domestic violence, horrific. That's child abuse. But then there's this invisible bondage that may be even more prevalent and might be even a bigger issue that we don't talk about, I think, enough. And that's depression. That's loneliness. It's other mental and behavioral challenges that people often don't see. It's PTSD. It's the things that make people veterans. We lose like 9 veterans a day. Oh, wow. These tough, strong, good people, because they can't deal with the pain that they've suffered and they don't really have an outlet. And so they, at the end of the day, it's better, instead of suffering every day, let's just not. And I've worked with great organizations all around. Unfortunately, in the charitable space, I hate to say it, but there are predators who take advantage of the goodwill of a lot of people. And so as AG, my job, I literally have, one of my functions is to oversee charities and make sure that they're abiding by the rules. And I've seen far too many that pretend to be. I don't know what the percentage is, but it's pretty high. Wow. Of people. And then I see a lot of charities where people want to do good, Mo. They have the best intent, but they're just not really equipped to do it. They're not, you know, it's like, hey, there's a cause. Let's start a charity, let's raise money. But then they have never run a business, really. They don't know. And so a lot of them just don't, they don't accomplish what they set out to. And then there's this really high impact charities, ones that change the world, but they need some funds, they need some help and awareness, and they need support. And so I've been dealing and working with so many charities, whether it's in the space of something like human trafficking or Safe UT, where it's resources and giving a tool like the Safe UT app for kids to be able to immediately get on with a mental behavioral health expert at uni, neuropsychiatric, and talk about their eating disorder or cyberbullying or cutting or being victimized by, you know, a predator or drug addiction. And we brought all these components together. So now Lava is, and I don't want Lava to necessarily be this huge brand that goes out. I want Lava to be kind of behind the scenes, like in Hawaii. Again, we try to a lot of times stay in the Asian community out of the limelight. It's more behind the scenes, but I want to leverage a lot of connections that I have from my days running a venture fund, from friends that I know that have multi-billion-dollar family offices. They can write checks. And instead of them managing a portfolio of trying to interview 20, 50 different charities, and many of them say, you know, Sean, since you vet all these and you know who has the highest impact, why don't we write a check to Lava instead? You give us an annual report, tell us how we've helped, who we've impacted, and we can cheer on and get as involved as we want to. And then I leverage, so I call those like funding partners, critically important. I have influence partners. These are guys like you guys who have influence in a space, or a UFC fighter, NFL player, NFL coach, Hollywood actor, you know, Grammy award-winning singer. All these friends that I've been fortunate enough to become acquainted with over the years, they don't necessarily write checks, but they raise awareness, and they bring an interest in the cause like no other can. I used to joke, I'd do a full video on human trafficking and maybe get like 10,000, YouTube. Ashton Kutcher could talk about it. He could just sneeze and he'd have like 20 million views.
Exactly.
And so we leverage both our influence partners, our funding partners, and then our mission partners. We go out and try to find, and if you know of some, Mo, let me know.
Yeah.
Those super high impact, they may be just starting out. They may be very mature already, and maybe they don't need a big check, but maybe they could use help with bringing awareness to their cause. I was just in England and in Ireland and got to meet with a lot of great people there. I won't mention exactly who for privacy, but members of the royal family there in the UK who are passionate about fighting human trafficking. And you would think with their reach, they would have connections everywhere. Well, you know what? They were more than happy to connect and be introduced to other players in that arena, because they, like many others, sometimes feel isolated and alone, like they're doing it on their own without, who else is in that space? Who do we trust? Who do we invest our time with, our resources? And so Lava we just launched it this year. We launched it a few months ago at a thing called 1640 Society in the Hamptons, some of the world's most influential family offices and families. And the beauty of it is it's not political. As much as I like my public service, and I'm proud of my time in office, I don't have to talk about. I mean, these were people that ideologically probably we don't agree on much, but they were celebrity names that you would recognize and know. And they were like, can we jump on board this Lava train? Because it's perfect. We help identify the highest impact entities that need help, and then we bring all these resources together. We help accelerate and grow, and we do it simultaneously under this banner of liberating people from bondage. Again, it could be economic bondage, so it could be scholarships, it could be social bondage. What do I mean by that? There's a lot of discrimination. There's a lot of inequalities. I mean, in the criminal justice system, there are ways that we need to address. There's, for example, this great organization that we've been helping called Freedom's Children that helps support the 5 million American kids who have parents who are incarcerated.
Oh.
And you wouldn't think much about that, but it's so hard for them to stay in contact, just to make phone calls or write letters. And it's critical that they still are able to connect to their parents while their parents are serving their time and paying their debt to society. And so no one's thinking about those kids. No one's helping them. And this one young lady who is so dynamic, she is amazing. And I would love for you to read her story. She's been, in People magazine and Jada Pinkett. She's changing that. And I want to bring resources and connections and support, political support, economic support, influencers and celebrities. And within a short amount of time, we've been able to take just her idea and hyper inject all of this. And you can see it's blowing up all across America. And her name's Wangel Browning, by the way, just amazing. And her husband, Pastor Marty Browning, they're young kids, but so much passion, and with just the right amount of help and support, we stay out of their way, but guide them. Man, it's like watching a comet just explode. And we've seen this with other organizations and groups that I've worked with. A good example is Operation Underground Railroad. Tim Ballard's somebody who's amazing that I met, and Tim invited me into his life and his world, and it changed my life. I was handling human trafficking cases domestically with my office, but what he opened my eyes to everything going on around the world. He sacrificed a lot. OUR, when I was started with them, was very small organization, and Tim, at that point, it was kind of an inflection point, and I and other people brought our resources in, and it grew just meteorically. Now, again, when you have that kind of success, a lot of haters come out. It's a good lesson to learn. The more good you do, the more haters will be out there. And, Tim and many others, Tim has, just from that organization, has spawned a number of other organizations in the fight against human trafficking. And, there are people in cancel culture and jealous folks that will try to tear down whatever good you build up. Yeah. Mother Teresa would always talk about that and say, but it's not between, it's really not about between you and them anyway, right? That if you go and read that poem anyway, that hung on her wall in her little Calcutta apartment, it's at the end, the punchline is so worth it. I don't want to give it away, but hopefully you guys look that up.
I'm looking it up right here.
And it's really about the relationship between you and somebody else. It's not about them. They no matter what good you do, somebody will always try to tear it down. But look at that. And well, for your listeners, the point is it's between you and God, and that's really what matters, not the naysayers, the pollsters, the how many Instagram posts, whether you're certified, any of that stuff. It's that. So lava has become an important embodiment of what I've tried to do. You asked about legacy, and so when I leave office, again, I don't know when that's going to be. It could be sooner rather than later. I believe that people should all get a chance to serve, and you shouldn't hang around for forever. But I want lava to be a conduit for all my friends, guys like you, to help us find the next OUR. So OUR is plenty. It's fine on its own right now. It's got all the resources and influence that it needs, but there are others like Freedom's Child and Free a Girl, and that are coming up, that are just starting out, that could use a lot of help. And then there are more established ones. I mean, we work with large partners like in the human trafficking space, like Polaris Project, right, or really big Truckers Against Trafficking that already have a lot, but we still can add our piece to help amplify their mission. So I didn't mean to digress too much. Into
this isn't
lava.
Digression at all. This is what I love about this format, is because we talk about what people do in where their recognized roles are, whether that be in public and private, whatever it might be. And then it goes into something like this, and you see where the true passion projects are and the impact that you're having on people way outside yourself, and with the right intents. And I couldn't have scripted it better, man.
No, I appreciate that, bro. Think about it. Think about kids who don't have opportunities in the inner city, and using something like MMA, something that you and I both love, to give them chances. Or Tony Finau and the Finau Foundation. Tony's story, if you got to get Tony on sometime and interview him, he'll blow you away. And his foundation to help kids, like golf coming up, none of us played golf, and especially Polynesians. We're like, maybe the only time I ever, held a golf club was to try to keep somebody from stealing hubcaps off the car. But this golf has opened up a whole new world for Tony and our culture and people, big donors and country clubs and all these things now. And it's really cool how he's leveraged that in a positive way to open up. And so when I talk about bondage, I'm not talking just about, of course, incarceration, right, in the criminal justice system. I mean, physical bondage. You talk to a woman who's been 20 years a victim of domestic violence, or a child who's been sexually molested, that we interview in our children's justice centers in Utah. And you talk about a hell that they're living in, or a survivor of human trafficking. It's not like just one of Dante's, circles of hell. It's all of them combined. And or education, like I mentioned, and economics, or almost anything that is good and worthwhile, we can fit under the umbrella of lava to help liberate people from some form of imprisonment or bondage. And again, I can't harp enough on things like loneliness. The internet and social media has connected us in some ways, but has created a dynamic where we're more isolated and alone than ever. And then COVID came on top and created even more separation in society. We don't just sit and talk story on the stoop a lot anymore. We're so hyper programmed and we're so efficient in our lives, and that human connection is missing for so many people. And all they need to do is have one person, Mo, who tells them that they care about him, or Gary, that they feel loved. I don't know, Gary, if you are related to Colin Karchner, who is a dear friend of mine and was one of the greatest advocates that we had, may he rest in peace and God bless his soul, to protect children. But I helped him when he was first starting off, and his message to get us back connected, and the perils of smartphones and technology. Of course, technology can be used for so much good, but it has another side to it. And he was a warrior. No wonder that Karchner family has that strong warrior spirit, and I miss him. I still work with Gab Wireless a lot, a company that he helped build up and worked with closely. But all of these things, if this program, as you bring on all these luminaries and leaders, people much more important than me, if you can ask them, or maybe guide them and keep reminding your listeners about people who are homeless, or people who are struggling with mental health or emotional health or behavioral health challenges. To me, that's a space where, let me end on this, Mo, because I've probably so far surpassed my time, but
there's no
years ago when I first came into office, I wanted to create a 3-digit number. Like we have 911, right? For physical emergencies.
Yep.
Everyone knows, even a small kid knows, some emergency, what do? Call 911. It's so intuitive and ingrained in our society. Why don't we have that? Because if you call 911 and you say, I've got pills or a gun and I'm going to kill myself. No knock on 911 dispatchers or help, but they're not very well equipped to deal with that. They might say, well, hold on a second. Let me get someone. That is the last thing you want to say there. Or you get a phone tree if you call an emergency number, or 911, they're excellent at connecting for, law enforcement or firefighters, but even they aren't really well equipped to deal with a young person who has a car. This is a true story, that's about to drive it off over a cliff overlooking the bluffs of St. George. Popular kid, captain of the football team, great family, everything externally looking like he's the perfect kid with the perfect life. But something had gone really, really, really wrong in his personal life, and it affected him deeply, and he just wanted to end his life. And fortunately, right before he drove his car off the ledge, he was texting a goodbye note to his mom, and he remembered that his bishop from his congregation had made all the youth promise that if they ever were in trouble or saw a friend that was in trouble, they would use the Safe UT phone app and text in. This is a program that I and several others instituted in 2014 because we couldn't get a 3-digit emergency number passed in Utah. And this young man saw it, remembered his commitment to his bishop, texted in, immediately got on the other side a caring, compassionate, and highly trained, skilled therapist who was able to keep him, literally back him off the edge. Now, this young man is gone on to college, a mission, amazing things and looks back and said, I can't believe I was even thinking of doing that. But in that moment, he was more than ready to do it. And he needed somebody else besides dispatch. Hey, we'll patch you into, the local sheriff. Again, no disrespect to my really good friends, sheriffs and deputies. And so we struggled and we couldn't get it in Utah. We went nationally, and Orrin Hatch and Chris Stewart, Senator Hatch, Congressman Stewart, helped us pass a law, which 99% of America doesn't realize, 99.99%. It is a law currently today that every state has to stand up a 988 number. It was a 3-digit number. And then my friend Ajit Pai, as he was chairing the FCC last year, assigned 988. So it might take 5 years or 10 years for us to build all the infrastructure behind it. But if for my legacy, I only do one thing, and that one thing is create a number where your children or my children or grandchildren can call right away 988 and get the kind of immediate response that you would if someone were drowning in a pool or something was on fire, like you get with 911.
Yeah. I
can't even imagine how many lives will save or also will improve and help increase the quality. And that started here in Utah. We pushed and pushed to raise awareness about that, because that kind of prison,
oh yeah,
that's the worst. Nobody sees it. Nobody realizes. They say, hey, Maurice looks so put together. He's got the perfect family. He's always smiling and happy. And that's true. But no one knows what kind of pain you might be enduring at any given time, Mo. And if statistically you look around, just a few of our friends, one of those friends is suffering deeply right now in that invisible prison. And man, if there's ways that we can reach out, Gary, and just be you and shed some of that light that you carry with you and that mana spirit, that's why we need things like organizations like Lava to be able to channel. People then want to help and say, what do I do? Well, you contact us in Lava, and we don't do it ourselves. We say, I'll tell you, there's these 3 nonprofits that are just doing amazing things. I'll connect you with all 3, and you can choose how you want to do it. So, man, thank you for letting me come on and talk stories.
This could go on and on. I love this, Sean. It's just, and just so you know, Gary's a practicing nurse. And so there's a lot of stuff that he sees on the I'll let you talk about that, Gary. But
no.
Gary, do you know that it was we did a huge case where we shut down a human trafficking ring that touched 27 states. A public elected official was using his relationships and knowledge of the Marshall Islands to bring birth mothers here in Arizona and Arkansas and have their kids here and basically hanai them, what we call in Hawaii. Hanai is it's like an adoption, but the kids always remain part of the birth family. My tutu wahine, the one you talked about, Grandma Loki, when she was a young girl, she's the second oldest of 15. So her parents said, hey, her grandpa is alone now. Her grandma died in a Kona fishing village. We'll let her, Loki, go help and live with him, to help him with chores, to help him when he can't bend over, to pick stuff up. And she lived till she was like 13 or 14 with her grandpa caring for him, always with the understanding she would come home to her family. And this public official was using that concept to exploit birth mothers, to say, let your child live with an American family. They'll always be yours, and you can always have them come back. And then he would sell them on the black market, good families that just were desperate, didn't want to wait 2 years, and were willing to pay a lot of money. And so the victims were the adoptive families, the birth families, the children, of course, themselves. And this ring that we took down, Utah had the lead. For 2 years, we investigated. We got indictments and then prosecution. And this individual is going to serve federal time in Arkansas and then state time in Utah and Arizona. It was because of nurses that called us on our hotline medical professionals who noticed that something was wrong with the birth mothers and that they spoke a different language, needed a translator, they were stressed, and it was very courageous on their part. And also, I think, again, a nod to our frontline first responders who are medical professionals, nurses, doctors, and others. So Gary, thank you for your service. And it was, again, your colleagues. I just spoke to a group 2 days ago, or maybe 3 days ago, of emergency nurses up in Park City, and thanked them for calling that in. Otherwise, this individual might still be, probably would be, perpetrating those crimes and that fraud against so many people. So nurses, you guys are amazing. And Mo, man, let me come back another time, and
Yes.
I could talk story about a ton of other things, but
I love it.
Utah, Idaho, you know, the AG of Idaho and the governor joked that Utah is just a suburb of Idaho anyway, and that we're very similar culturally, and you know, the boundaries are kind of artificial. I feel that way. I feel so much kinship with friends, and I've owned businesses in Idaho and love that. We really are leading out on a lot of areas, and public officials can't do it alone. We need private sector companies. We need NGOs. We need people like you, influencers who have podcasts and shows, to talk about these things, to remind people, to challenge people, challenge your listeners. Hey, get involved. If anybody wants to learn more about, for instance, lava, just check out golava.org, golava.org. Check it. We're new. We're starting up. We've got great partners all around the world. But if you have an idea for us, you want to talk to us, check it out. Reach out. You can reach me through Maurice and Gary. Mo, man, we didn't even get to talk MMA.
Yes. There, one time I want to get you on with Chuck Liddell's coach. We interviewed him, John Hackleman.
Oh yeah, and you know what? Thank goodness Chuck got cleared from that. I read last night. Iceman's great. I saw him at the Conor fight. We had some of Dana's tickets for the Conor McGregor fight. Sat next to Max Holloway, Hawaii boy.
Yes.
A lot of really cool guys. Max and I gave Max a bunch of Li Hung Mui candies and stuff. His girlfriend was just like, "Oh my gosh, these are so good," and I'm like, and everybody's looking at us like, "What's the funny thing that Reyes and Holloway are eating?" And I'm like, "Man, you got to be part of the club, man. You can't be touching our snacks, our crack seed, or Li Hung Mui stuff." But big fights coming up. I can't make the November 6th fight. We have several. I have good friends who are fighting. Not in this fight, but Francis Ngannou is a dear friend. You have to hear his story sometime. Growing up in Cameroon in the salt mines, the Shevchenko sisters are great, and Champ just won. Good belt wins, but the Wei Li fight, Rose Namajunas fight, that's gonna be a brawl. That's gonna be just brutal. And then you got Covington and Usman. Oh my gosh, I've been in the room with both of those guys. We were trying to help Kamaru's dad in his last fight, make sure that he could come watch his son fight. And Colby, I've done events with him. Man, that's gonna be a Donnybrook. Just that fight, and there's several other great fights. Little shout out to the Utah fighting community. We just gave an award to Manny Pacquiao. We just saw several of the Fulmer family, great boxers. When it comes to MMA, I mean, we have some of the best here, and I'd love to spend an episode talking about Utah. You know, I was introduced from the Hickson Gracie school and team through Pedro Sauer. Professor Sauer came out early in the 90s, and you know, I was there and got to train and watch Mark Schultz and Lonnie and Big Todd and a lot of these guys who are like the legends of in Utah. And then there's so many others who are great. Who did you train with, Mo, in Utah?
So
I can't remember.
I was training before MMA, and the guy that I trained with was a guy named Nobu Sato. He's long since passed. He was a judo master in Salt Lake. Yeah. And you talk about the influence, and this is why we do have to do another show on that, because the influence that he had on me was lifelong. And ironically, when I went to Columbia, New York, I was speaking to a professor over there out of the blue, and he was from Holland, and he goes, "Wait, you're from Utah?" I goes, "Yes." And I go, "And did you do judo?" I go, "Yes." We had the same judo instructor, Nobu Endo, and this guy is a world-class professor and still a judoka. And so that community is a whole nother level as well. So we have to do another one, Sean. That's cool.
I trained under the Matsumori.
Did you?
Yeah, Maurice taught me all my moves. We always laugh. My thing is I just know crazy and I know how to use it. So
those Karchners, man, they're crazy.
My dad always, he was a lifelong martial artist and always taught us, the best moves to get away, run away, avoid the fight. And, that's not the macho Hollywood, vision, but if you can avoid having to fight, that's always better. But that'll be fun. Next time we need to broadcast from Maurice's dojo. And,
there you go.
Yeah.
Well, let's do it. We'll hold on right after this ends. And thank you for joining us. This has been a blast.
Yeah, absolutely. Gary, privileged to be on with you. Mo,
likewise.
Man, keep on doing good, bro. When you called, I was like, what a perfect host. The energy that you've got, you just make me and everybody else smile talking to you. Thank you for how good you've been to my family for all these years, and I love you, bro. You take care.
Goes right back. All right.
We'll see you. Take care, guys.
Yeah.